Welcome back. We're getting into our first conversation of today, and that's looking at an interesting development in Nigeria's security situation. Now, a coalition of 68 civil society groups in Nigeria have criticized President Muhammadu Buhari's actions in tackling insecurity in the country. The coalition says the Buhari administration failed to carry out its primary duty under Section 14 of the 1999 Constitution, which is ensuring the security and welfare of Nigerians.
Now, the civil society groups also pointed out what they described as the injustices by the present government against the people, such that peaceful protesters were threatened and attacked by security agents, while terrorists carrying out mass murder, rape and maiming and kidnapping were feted and, morally condoled and granted amnesty and paid by the government. Now, as well as the prosecution of the media and free speech.
They are laying the blame for the large-scale terrorist attacks in the Northeast, extrajudicial killings by state security agencies in various forms, inter-ethnic violence, and the menace of political cult groups and ethnic militia squarely at the feet of government. We are now joined by Abiodun Baiyewu. She is the country director of Global Rights Nigeria, from where she directs the organization's natural resources and human rights campaign and programs. Abiodun, good morning and welcome to Breakfast Central. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with this. We know that Nigeria has had violent acts and insecurity spread across the country over the past several years. What particularly prompted the call now from these civil society organizations that the federal government declare a state of emergency in the country? What's different now that wasn't in play 4 years ago, 2 years ago, even maybe 6 years ago? What's different now?
What's different now? Things have gotten worse. Things have progressively gotten worse over the years. But in the past 1 year, between January 2010 and December 2010, the rate of casualties of mass atrocities across Nigeria grew by 43%. That is alarming. In a single year, to have a double-digit growth, and not just a double-digit growth, but almost half of the atrocities on the rise is very, very alarming. And we just have to say something about it and act as fast as possible.
All right, Abiodun. Well, the year 2020 was quite a brutal year for most people with the pandemic of coronavirus, which disrupted nations and systems across the world, also in Nigeria. But as Nigerians were also battling that, many also, were faced with dealing with, violence, attacks, clashes, terrorism, kidnapping, and extrajudicial killings. Now, what do you think is responsible for this increase, in insecurity in the country, Nigeria?
It's not just single reason, but then I would think at the core of all of the reasons is impunity. The failure to deal with criminal and organized criminal groups as organized criminal groups. I don't think our biggest problem in Nigeria is corruption. Corruption is just a branch of impunity. Our biggest problem in Nigeria is ensuring that people are punished for their crimes and crimes are sufficiently investigated, and that we have the rule of law applying to everyone and every group across the nation. We tend to give blanket amnesty once we're able to throw a blanket name over a crime. For example, to call it banditry, and very soon we say not all bandits are criminals. To say terrorism, and then because they're terrorists, we grant them amnesty. Extrajudicial killings are often just ignored and overlooked. Cold gang clashes are called cold gang clashes, and because of that, they're not punished. The same would go for ethnic and religious conflicts. But
Abiodun, do we say have you there?
All right, the limit sometimes of technology. So our guest is Abiodun Baiyewu. She is the country director, executive director of Global Rights Nigeria. And Global Rights is one of the civil society organizations that came together over the weekend to, of course, really take to task, more than take to task, criticize the Buhari administration for their actions or lack thereof. So I do believe Abiodun is back. Abiodun?
Hi.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No problem, no problem. So as you were speaking that, you said it's not just one reason in particular, but you're really highlighting the issue of impunity, a lack of consequence. This person does it and gets away with it. This person goes a little further and gets away with it. That one goes a little bit further and gets away with it. But you mentioned the issue of amnesty, and there are those who have a lot of questions. So we have seen, as Nigerians, the government reaching a settlement with some of these armed groups. And recently we've heard calls for amnesty to be granted to repentant kidnappers and militia men, people who have taken up arms against the Nigerian state and have maimed, killed, and, you know, even put the lives of Nigerians in danger. Around this issue of amnesty and these calls for forgiveness, what do you really think lies at the heart of this?
Is that the rule of law is not applicable in Nigeria, and that there are citizens who are considered higher than other citizens. If we must have an orderly society, the rule of law must apply to all. If you committed the crime, then pay the time. This attitude would only lead to reprisal attacks and to embolden other criminals to continue in this act, and we will have no end to this. We must remember, of course, there was the amnesty in the Niger Delta. The amnesty in the Niger Delta supposedly had brought peace to the Niger Delta. But then you need to query that peace and the proliferation of arms and new types of violence in the Niger Delta. And the fact that we've been shushing the Niger Delta for years with money, just throwing money at the problem and hoping it goes away. We're doing the same with the North. We don't have those type of resources, and we cannot afford to continue to incubate crime in the name of forgiveness.
Well, Abiodun, we have seen cases where the government, tries to use security agencies to deal with the problems and, struggles. And in many cases, government resorts to negotiation. Now, what message does that send to these perpetrators of violence? And what message does it also send to the victims and the society as well?
Well, the first message it sends to the perpetrators of violence is that you are that powerful. And we concede, you've won. So can we negotiate peace? And it says to the victims that you do not matter, and these people matter more than you do. And so we will prioritize them above you, which is very unfortunate.
Okay, so let's talk a bit more about some of the statements, because particularly with the press briefing this past weekend, it was very harsh on the Buhari administration. And in a recent video, the Minister of Defense, Major General retired Bashir Magashi, actually encouraged Nigerians to defend themselves against bandits. He said it is the responsibility of everybody to keep alert and find safety when necessary. We shouldn't be cowards. Sometimes the bandits come with about 3 rounds of ammunition, and when they fire shots, everybody will run. Why should people run away from minor aggressions? We should stand and face them. If these people know that the people have the competency and capability to defend themselves, they will run away. Then you also hear somebody like the Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, who was speaking, saying that kidnappings happen in Western countries like the United States. When you hear comments from high-ranking members of the administration like this, what do you make of the administration's genuine idea to actually stop these issues and the way that they seek to address them?
First, let me say that our statement last weekend was very mild, very, very mild. And that the problem is what the problem is, and that our leaders have been very irresponsible in their statement. Now, those statements, both by the Minister of Information and Culture and also by the Chief Defense Staff, are grossly irresponsible. They should be retracted, and the president himself should disown and disassociate himself from such a statement, from such statements. The call for Nigerians to arm themselves and stand their ground is a call for everyone to go into self-defense, and it's a call to a full civil war, which they will not be able to contain. Now, the call, the assertion by the Minister of Information was a total misinformation to say that kidnapping happens in other countries, including in the United States. Now, do they have kidnappings to the level in which we have in Nigeria? Now, the threshold lowest number of documented people who were kidnapped last year was 2,002. Those were the documented ones, publicly documented ones. Now, if in a single year, more than 2,000 of your citizens were kidnapped, and many of them killed and maimed, raped, brutalized, and you say it is a normal occurrence, you are not normal, and you're being very irresponsible.
Well, Abiodun, let's follow up on that. Now, the latest reports, from the global rights, now the mass atrocities report back in 2020 details how over 4,000 Nigerians lost their lives to violence incidences alone in the past year. Now, we've noted a very glaring spike of almost 43% in the number of casualties in comparison to 2019 figure of just over 3,000. Now, what are the solutions you think to these security issues, that are endangering the lives of Nigeria? There has to be some way out of all this.
Well, there are ways out of this, and every year we've come out, each time we brought out the atrocities reports to make recommendations to the government. The first is that there are no low-hanging fruits. We must avoid just knee-jerk reactions, which is what you're seeing. But we must go for the long term and have sustainable actions to get us out of this mess. First is that Nigeria must invest in its Human Development Index. The Northeast has the worst Human Development Index in the whole of Nigeria, and that accounts largely for why Boko Haram was able to take over that territory very, very easily. You have the most number of out-of-school children in the world in Nigeria. Now, once you fail to educate your children, you have created fodder for violence, because then you also need for them to be employed. And if they're not gainfully employed, they will be otherwise employed. We also do not have proper ways of ensuring social welfare for our citizens. So people living with disability, people who are unemployed, people who are in one dire state or the other, or unhoused, do not have solutions to these problems. We must ensure that we close our borders, or not close our borders, we secure our borders, and that we're able to take the ungoverned spaces in Nigeria and usefully employ them. So the atrocities in the north were higher than in the south. Yes, extrajudicial killings were higher in the south than in the north, but that the number of killings in the north were actually higher than the south. Nigeria is shaped like a funnel, which means the land mass in the north is higher than the south. Now, if the land mass in the north is higher than the south, you also have more ungoverned spaces in the north, which is where the criminal, organized criminal groups and bandits hang out and hide, kidnap citizens and operate from. Now, government needs to reclaim and govern those places and use them to create social structures, social infrastructure, by which Nigerians can engage in economic activities that will draw us away from this madness. For example, take Katsina State, where you've got the issues of climate change. You've got to be able to, for example, that you can have solar farms that can feed the whole of northern Nigeria from just Katsina State if you employ the current ungoverned spaces in that state. We also need to ensure the welfare and security of our security forces. Now, of the more than 4,500 citizens that were killed in mass atrocities last year, 698 of them, at least 698 of them, were of security agents. But we've also noticed a spike in the number of security agents that are also committing suicide and are attacking their fellow officers unprovoked. They're not well equipped, and as you know, there were videos that surfaced last year of them talking about their lack of equipment as well, and this has gone on for a few years. Okay. We must ensure that our police is equipped, their welfare is also taken up. If you go to a police mess, a typical police mess, it's worse than prisons in other countries. If we do not treat our police well, if we do not equip them well, we cannot expect them to act decently and fulfill their critical role in this nation. And police officers are dying as well.
Abiodun, I need to quickly interject. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up, but I need to ask this question. 68 civil society groups: Global Rights, the Center for Democracy and Development, Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, Media Rights Agenda, as well as the Socioeconomic Rights and Accountability Project were among the CSOs that came together to make a demand for a state of emergency. So very quickly, if you can, what are the next steps that you, as these civil society organizations, are willing to take if this situation continues to deteriorate without what you consider reasonable actions coming from the Buhari administration?
Please know that civil society is not just organizations, it's not just NGOs, it's everyone. That would include the media, that will include Nigerians occupying their civic space. We've been quiet long enough. Our silence will no longer be loyalty to this country, and we will speak. We will speak on the streets if we need to, but we will also need to hold our representatives in parliament responsible. They represent us. They should be our voice. And if they fail to be our voice, they will hear from us. You will see actions from civil society if government does not step up to the plate.
Okay.
All right. Abiodun Baiyewu, Country Director at Global Rights Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us today on Breakfast Central.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and we'll definitely have you back because I don't think that, as she said, it's not an easy win and it's definitely not going to be low-hanging fruit. This has to be consistent, sustained, very deliberate action for Nigeria to get a handle on its insecurity issues. So these conversations
68.
will continue. 68.
Wow, 68 groups.
Yeah.
Coming together to, for this, and it only shows how serious the situation is now in terms of insecurity in the country. We're going back to the comments from the Minister of Defense, almost incensed by it. Personally, when I watched the video, and even hearing you read that statement again, I was like, oh my gosh, are we there? Are we there now?
We're there.
Are we there now?
We're there.
And there's been no rebuff from the federal government or
and a very valid point that Abiodun made.
Yeah, from that, because that is the Minister of Defense of Nigeria. Was that a call to arms? That was really
There are
shocking.
questions. All right, so we're going to take a quick time out. Our next guest is with us. We're going to shift gears a bit, and those gears are shifting into mother language, mother tongue. The International Mother Tongue Day was celebrated recently, and we get into the conversation has the theme of fostering multilingualism. When we come back, Olisa is going to be on the hot seat, and our guest is going to join us. Do stay with us.
Tongue-tied.